But big change starts in small conversations among people who deeply care. This is what started everything. I started conversations, people called me up, we started talking and realizing, why are we all trying to do the same thing on our own? There is enough trauma in the state of Illinois and the country that we can work together, and it's going to be much more powerful, and that we need the community. We need everyone involved. The regional office, we can't do it ourselves. So we started talking, and lo and behold, Amelia Finch from the Illinois Education Association in our area called me up and said, hey, Jill, I hear you're doing some stuff on trauma. We're trying to do some stuff too. Do you think we could sit down and maybe figure out something we could do together? And we were even thinking, one PD event or something. Well, then I started talking to Danny Kraft from the Education Coalition, and she does a lot in our community, and she has that community piece and the community attention. So I said, well, why don't you come to this meeting? So we sit down and start talking, the three of us, and just out of the blue, I'm like, you know what? I'm so tired of doing professional, because we were brainstorming ideas for PD, and I said, we keep doing these sit and get PDs, like we're doing right now. But we've all seen them. Teachers go, they come back, and they don't change their behavior or change anything that they're doing. The same outcome. And as a PD planner, I started thinking, am I really serving a purpose here? Are we making a difference? Or am I just wasting my time, wasting everybody's time? We know, and my years as an administrator, I know that change happens when it happens within. So we have to go into these schools and see if we can build capacity and change the culture. So I said, what if at the administrator back to school breakfast, when we have like 100 administrators attention that morning in August, just say, hey, if you would like to be a trauma-informed pilot school, we're going to select 5 and put all of our resources into these schools. And I made this announcement thinking maybe we'll get 1 or 2. I even had a few friends on backup that were administrators, like, your school better be 1 because we need it. I'm going to look silly. As soon as I left the microphone, my phone started ringing off the hook. Jill, my school needs this. We need this. Please. And so we had to do an application process. And through the application process, it was just a Google form, and I'd share it with you, but really simple questions. How are you going to create time for professional development when we come in? Are you going to be committed? We want to make sure that we have access to everybody, meaning bus drivers, cooks, custodians, parents, all in. This is all in. And so we had 17 schools apply, had to turn down a lot, had to select 5. And we selected the 5 where we felt like leadership was on board, because it's one thing, I would have teachers come up to me, we're really into this and we want to be trauma-informed, but our principal just doesn't get it. Then no. And I had this question last time, how can we do this in the schools that need it? You have to have leadership on board. And so these leaders, these principals were very much, we want to do this. We have a strong teacher leadership too that's on board. So we selected the 5. Well, as we were in the process of selection, you can see SIU School of Medicine through conversation. They came on board. So to have that health piece, it's been such a powerful partnership, because you have to have the teacher union on board. I mean, let's be real. Gator Public Schools has 7 unions. We have to have the teacher union on board, the regional office, the community piece, and the health piece, because we know when we're looking holistically at the child, we need that health piece. So just recently, we're in year 2 of this partnership, we have, as a team, created our own logo, Trauma-Informed Partnership, Healthy Families, Schools, and Communities. So we do so many events together. Instead of putting all 4 of our logos, we've started doing that. We had a vision. Even before we selected the 5 schools, we thought, you know what, year 1, we're just going to build awareness. We're going to spend an entire year, because we know if we really want to make a cultural shift, they have to feel it in here. We have to spend a whole year just building awareness of what is trauma, how does toxic stress affect the brain, and we want to make sure that it's systemic change, that it's not one of these federal grants coming in and we're just forcing change on them. This is change that we are supporting, so that when we walk away, it carries on. If they change leaders, it carries on. It's systemic change, meaning the people in the building are the ones driving the change. They're recognizing the the issues and they're doing the problem solving. So we knew it had to be that way to be effective. I truly believe in baby steps in anything, making it simple and real. We did not need binders and charts and diagrams to make this happen. We had to jump in and start doing it ever so slowly. So I get asked all the time, like, where's the chart or the diagram? Cultural shift doesn't happen that way. Year 2 came about. We actually, our goal was we're going to have 5 pilot schools this year, and then 5 more next year. And then by year 2, we realized that the 5 trauma-informed pilot schools we'd been spending so much time in, we needed to spend for sure another year, maybe 2 with them, because our goal changed a little bit. We want them to start supporting other schools so that it truly grows, because we ourselves, the regional, I can't get into every school, but now I'm training in a lot of my schools this summer, the teachers that are in those schools and the administrators, they're going out and mentoring and training other schools. So that's building capacity, and that became year 2. Also, our schools started talking about, school-wide, if we're a trauma-informed school, policies have to change. So what are things that are not trauma-informed that we all collectively decide to stop doing, and what are we going to all start doing? And again, all 5 of the schools, their goals look different. Muffley Elementary, they decided they're going to stop just immediately sending kids to the office. They're going to try intervention. So every teacher has agreed we're going to try some interventions first. Every classroom has a calm corner. They decided to start doing, they're a Muffley Mustang, so they do the Muffley Roundup. So they're doing circles every morning. They have classroom mantras. So they all collectively things they're doing. Year 2, secondary trauma also popped up. It popped up in a sad way because one of our pilot schools, unfortunately, very sadly, last summer, one of the teachers, there was actually a married couple, and her husband, one of the teachers across the hall, committed suicide. And it rocked that school, it rocked me to the core, it rocked our partnership to the core. The principal of the school called me up and she said, Jill, I don't know, I just don't know if we can do this anymore. And that was right after it happened. She called me up the very next day. No, this is very important. This is an example. We need to pay attention not only to our students, but our teachers. And our teachers are suffering from secondary trauma. They have their own traumas. And we really took a step back from looking at the kids and spent our year looking at making sure we have healthy adults taking care of our kids. So that was kind of an eye-opener in year 2. That same building had another teacher who, I think it was the 1st of May, he was found in the closet. The kids were in the hallway. He was having a panic attack in the closet. And later he shared, he said, we studied so much about trauma. Some of my own traumatic issues from childhood that I have pushed aside are starting to come out, and I need to deal with them, and I need to process them, and I need to get healthy and step back. And he did step out of teaching for a little bit so that he can come back stronger. So that was kind of a big one, and why I put it first, the secondary trauma piece, because, and their own trauma, but also some of these teachers are taking home trauma from the kids, and it's exhausting. There's compassion fatigue. And that was the eye-opener in year 2. Really, after going through year 1, we kept talking about kids' trauma, and then I would have adults come up to me and be like, I had this happen to me. Like, whoa, we need to step back. So our 5 schools, we purposely picked elementary, high school, rural, urban, high poverty, all of those things to really have different demographics so we could see the journey of each of the 5 and how it comes about. Our Jenna Oriana Elementary has an enrollment of 480 kids. They're a K-5, pretty white school, but lots of mobility. They move in and out. They're right on the border of Decatur Public Schools. DeLand Weldon, at each of these schools could tell their own story. They've all done just amazing things, but this school is a K-12 school, one building in the middle of nowhere, 221 kids. Anybody been there? I've done Alice training there with law enforcement, and we're like, maybe 20 minutes before anybody gets here, so you better figure out what to do. I mean, they're really in the middle, and some of these kids think Decatur is like, going to Chicago. So it's a very different culture, lots of trauma. They had a pregnant girl the other day who was convinced she wasn't pregnant, and they're like, I think you're in labor, but you're not. Anyway, just lots of traumatic issues even in the small county schools, but their staff has just been phenomenal. The culture of that building has completely changed in 2 years. It's hard to describe because you can't collect data on that. It's really a narrative, and I'll talk about that in a second. Franklin Elementary, one of our 2 DPS, Decatur Public Schools, again, very diverse, 86% low income. You can imagine the issues there. They're making great strides. Muffley is the school I was just talking about. They're interesting because they're over 400 kids and they house the SED program, social emotionally disturbed, for the whole district, and they have 1 principal. So that is a challenging school who right now is, I mean, both of them are the shining stars of Decatur. You walk in there, you can see such a difference between the schools that we have not been in Decatur in culture and all. And then Sangamon LA High School, you want to make sure we got a high school in there. I was an administrator in that district for about 8 years. High poverty, very lot of white poverty in that district. So our team, when we got together, we really didn't know what we were doing. And I'll be honest, I was facilitating, and often I just felt like I was doing something wrong, but we just forged ahead and realized that there was no plan for this. And so what has started to work for us by year 2 is consistently meeting monthly. So we set our monthly meetings. We try to meet at each different location. We meet with the principals only quarterly because we have 2 team members from our core planning group that are assigned to each building. So I'm assigned to Muffley, which is why I talk about Muffley Elementary the most. But it's really helped, so when we get together for a core planning, I can go around the room. Okay, the 2 people who are kind of adopted Franklin Elementary, tell me what's going on in there. They're the ones that stay in contact with the principal, find out what they need, how we can help them. And the fact that we combine existing resources. We have done all of this without any extra money or funding. We really just said it just makes sense. We all have resources for professional development. Why not pool them together, our resources, our people, and our time? So the fact that we've been able to use the expertise of SIU School of Medicine, now we have a gal in there that did her dissertation on school discipline. So I mean, just to have, and a pediatrician, so to talk about all the health issues, and then I was able to find a board certified behavior analyst who happened to be my former social worker for my school, his wife. So she's now on our team. So just people want to be a part of this. So you find passionate people, and they just, it's amazing how our team has grown, and just the brains in the room are unreal. I spent too much time on this last time, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. But we have to talk about the research. The research is what's driving everything that we do with our trauma-informed partnership. The research is how our community person, Danny, when she goes out to businesses, she shares the research, because you can imagine going to the executives at ADM or Caterpillar and talk about, we're responding differently. They see it as we're coddling kids. So we have to share the research and say, no, we're actually holding kids to a higher standard, because we're making them actually resolve and deal with the emotions and regulate and be accountable, but we're responding rather than reacting in a different way. But they have to understand that brain research. So it's important that in our schools, we all understand what a traumatizing event is. And this is one of the best definitions that I've seen. It's a threat to a person's physical survival, overwhelms your coping capacity, you feel alone, violates expectations. A small example, there was a little girl whose older brother kind of wrestling with her, and she loved her older brother and felt safe and trusted him. Well, he pinned her to the ground to the point she really thought she was going to suffocate. He just took it too far. And when she got up, she went and told her mom about it, and her mom blew her off as, oh, you're just overreacting. Your brother wasn't going to hurt you. You're fine. So when you look at this, even something as small as that, she thought she was going to choke to death. She was overwhelmed. She felt powerless because he had her pinned down. She told her mother about her fear, and her mother, instead of listening, kind of blew her off. And her brother is the one that's supposed to keep her safe, and he violated her expectations. So that's a simple example of one little moment that could be traumatizing. But we don't tend to talk, we tend to talk about just events or things that happen to us, but think about Katrina, 9/11. I mean, all of those things that we now see, that people, we didn't have the social media years ago. We are constantly seeing things that could be secondary trauma to us, or community events that are traumatizing, that fit all of those definitions. It's also important to understand what toxic stress is. We have positive, or the three levels: positive, tolerable, and toxic. Positive stress is what I feel when I'm presenting. You know, you're sweating a little more, your nerves are up a little bit. I mean, those are all things that it's increase in heart rate, but it usually helps you perform better. Athletes, before a big game, Olympics, you have that positive stress. So you have an increased heart rate, but you wouldn't want to have it all the time. It's just to help you perform better. Then you have tolerable stress. It's serious, but it's also buffered by supportive relationships. And I will shorten this story, but a quick story. My son Harrison, my middle boy, he's 13. He, this past year, went through just crazy medical issues. He had a appendicitis, emergency appendectomy, and then he got healed from that, and a few months later was complaining about his arm hurting. We finally discovered it was a bone tumor, non-malignant, thank goodness. And so he had to go through an interventional radiologist who went in, did an ablation of the bone tumor, drilled a hole in his little bone, and kind of burned that tumor out. We thought we were in the clear, and then he wakes up, hand is paralyzed. The interventional radiologist for the CT scan accidentally, I mean, I know he didn't do it on purpose, but hit his radial nerve. So his radial nerve was damaged. He has been paralyzed in the left hand since last June 14th. So this is his latest surgery. This kid's had 3 major surgeries in the past year. We had to take him to Dr. Susan McKinnon at Washington University in St. Louis, who's like the world leading expert, a pioneer in nerve and tendon transfer. And she performed a 12-hour surgery on him that required basically an incision, an S-shaped incision, all the way up his arm. They took nerves and rerouted them, nerves that he wasn't using that he could kind of give up, and rerouted them so that they would attach to his radial nerve and his brain would send signals to move. And then they also transferred a tendon to try to get his wrist to lift up and move again. So it's been a slow process, and if you can imagine, you know, he had the bone tumor, then he had this, so you can't really, this little boy is so resilient. He had this brace and this horrendous scar. It was tough, and I'll be honest, it was going back to stress, tolerable stress, to the point where I did not realize how much it impacted my health, me physically and emotionally, how difficult it was for me to watch my child go through this. But I say it was temporary because buffered by supportive relationships. I also recognize I'm an educated woman with a good job. I have good medical insurance. I have a husband. I was able to find the best specialist in the world on nerve transfer. And I understand not everybody can do that. Even just getting to Washington University in St. Louis was intimidating. So to have the skill to be able, and the supportive family to be able to get my son there and get an appointment. So I recognize that I have all of those supports. If I were a single mom on minimum wage, or would have no way to get to St. Louis, or no one to watch my other kids, well, I would start moving into toxic stress because I wouldn't be able to fix my son, and my son would have a paralyzed hand for the rest of his life. And I would be stressed out by not being able to beat his knees. So that was tolerable stress for me. So what's tolerable for some people may be toxic for others. Toxic stress, of course, is when it's in the absence of protective relationships. So it might be that person that's supposed to keep you safe and loved that's hurting you. Or that you're just constantly on that high stress response where your heart rate is up and it does impact you. And there's a very quick video, which I don't have time for. If you look up TED Ed, I'll at least get it pulled up. You don't have time to watch the videos today, but I at least want you to jot it down. There was a TED Ed video on how chronic stress affects your brain. So if you get a chance, watch that. It's a short one. It's a great one to show teachers because it goes through even chronic stress at work. I mean, we've all experienced stress and how it impacts our health. So that's a great video, but it actually goes through what happens to your brain. Great one to share. Yes, yes. Yeah, so if you go to TED Ed and I can share the links with you too. So that's important to know. So toxic stress, if it's persistent, if you're in that toxic stress column, we know it changes the biology of your brain. So look at the normal, typical neurons. There's many connections. You can see there all the wiring of the brain and the function. Toxic stress is damaging those neurons, shrinking your brain. It's rewiring your brain. And we know from children and studying the development of the brain at birth, you can see all the synapses that start at birth. Look at 6 years of age, millions of synapses forming. So think about a child, and Chaddock is a great example. When they were training us, they had a ball of yarn, and they had baby A and baby B, and they were showing how back and forth, a baby that's well nurtured, the string was going back and forth. So all of these positive connections. When I cry, someone's going to keep me safe and nurture me and touch me and talk to me. When I'm hungry, I'm going to be fed. So this child is learning to trust adults and feel attached versus the child that's neglected, who's hungry and nobody comes to feed me. So by the time their brain starts trimming all of their signals when they become 14 years of age, it might be that middle school kid that comes in your rooms like, I'm not listening to you. You're not going to tell me what to do. Because they are wired not to trust adults and they're living in the lower part of their brain. Judgment we know is the last to develop. You see these brain scans. I have a 17-year-old at my safe school who probably has a brain that looks more like this, if not worse. He looks like a grown man. But the damage that's been done to his brain through toxic stress and his ACE score in conversation with him is probably an 8 out of 10 that he developmentally is down here. We know judgment is the last to develop. So even our 20-year-olds, think of our college kids that are still making some dumb decisions. Even into the 26-year-olds. And still, their brains, believe it or not, the executive function, that judgment part of their brain is not fully developed. And that's in a healthy person. So I always tell teachers, my son Harrison, when he walks through the door and has this brace on his arm, teachers are very empathetic to that because they can see his arm. When kids walk in with toxic stress and their brain is wired so differently, we have no idea what's really going on in their brain, yet they have many of the needs that he has. So we know the important part of the brain. I've shared this many times. You've heard of Dr. Siegel. Dan Siegel does a great, very simple. I try to keep the brain simple with my teachers because I want them to listen and take something away, and I keep it simple with kids. And I say this hand model is a great model of the brain because your wrist is your stem. It's your lower brain, your reptilian, your fight or flight. Make sure your needs are met if you're hungry. You have the limbic brain, which is your amygdala. So the thumb here is my amygdala, the emotional part of my brain. And then your executive function or thinking cap is the top part. And so when I have kids go off, I had a 17-year-old just lose it the other day. I said, you flipped your lid. You flipped your lid and you got out of the thinking brain and you went straight to emotion. Probably because you were thinking from the bottom up. He felt scared, and so he went into fight or flight mode and then immediately reacted. And so he needed to self-regulate so he could get back to that. So we try to get kids to think from the top down. We have students walk in, and we expect them to be quiet and sit down and start working on math. Yet they are hungry, they're tired, they don't feel safe, they haven't made a connection with an adult. We need to make sure that they are regulated before we even ask them to get executive function, because executive function are all the things that we're trying to get kids to do. The thinking, planning, prioritizing. We know from brains, and I'm going to go quickly through this for time's sake, but we've seen these scans before, but the scans are showing us that the brains are wired differently, and my secondary teachers and community members have to see this probably more than elementary. because I always get the, we're just coddling these kids. No, when they walk in, their brains are wired differently. That's why we need to understand how the brain works. This is the healthy brain on the left. Look at all of that neural connectivity going on. This child has a chance to think before responding. This child truly is missing some of those connections from abuse and neglect. Their brain is truly wired differently. So that's our job, to understand the brain so that we can work on building executive function skills and self-regulation. I'm assuming everybody here has heard the ACE study. For time's sake, we're not going to go through that. But that was really important. I also tell teachers in my schools, don't hand out the ACE survey to your kids. It's not, even our SIU School of Medicine partners say that some of the health clinics are trying to just hand people the ACE. That's not a good way to do that. Just talk to them. When you talk to kids, my kiddo from the SAFE school, I talked to him in 30 minutes, and in conversation in 30 minutes, I counted 8 ACEs in my head. And I didn't need to sit down a sheet in front of them and ask them directly. When you know your kids, and of course, he was one who even said to me, he goes, I know I'm going to die in 20 years. I'm like, have you heard of the ACE study? And he hadn't, but it was like he already knew that he had a high risk. And so we got out the brain model and started talking about the beautiful thing at the brain. It's malleable, it can be rewired, and so we can work on self-regulation strategies and buy some time. So real quick, one of my favorite studies, and I know you've seen this before, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. This one for me is personally my aha moment, and everybody on this journey will have their moment. But he shared a study in the survey where there were 2 pictures that were shown, or several pictures in this study. He and his partner went into their waiting room and just randomly picked out some photos from the magazine. So there's nothing secret or hidden in these photographs. But he wanted to have a control group of children with 0 ACEs and a group of kids that had 6 or more ACEs. And he wanted to see what their response to the pictures, if it was any different. So in the first picture on the left, can you take a wild guess, what do you think was going on in the picture on the left? What did the control group say? And that was what they said. They even added something to it. The students in the control group actually said, yeah, the father and son are working on the car, and I bet they went to McDonald's afterwards and had some ice cream. I mean, they even added a happy piece to it. So imagine, you want to take this, and what do you think the ACE study group of kiddos said? 6 are definitely not as happy. What they actually said was, they actually looked at this picture. Their heart rates increased. They started getting physically agitated, and they said, I bet he's going to take that iron rod and he's going to whack his dad on the head. Blood's going to squirt everywhere, and the truck's going to fall on him and he's going to die. And their heart rates were so increased that the doctors were alarmed by their reaction from this simple photograph. They had to take the kids outside to the water fountain, give them a drink, help them calm down, help them regulate before coming back in. So now you have a little preview. What do you think about the second picture? Control group? What do you think the control group kiddos said? They see a pregnant woman looking out the window. So what do you think is happening with the...
She's probably just reminiscing as to the future with her baby, looking out the window and the possibilities of tomorrow.
The control group looked at that picture, and they pretty happy thoughts that she's thinking about her baby, the future, wants the baby, maybe dad's coming home, because of course there's a happy ending and a dad in the picture, right? So that was the control group. Now, what do you think the group with the ACE score, what do you think they said? 6 or more ACEs.
I think that would be just the opposite. She's actually thinking, I'm getting rid of this thing. I can't believe that I'm here doing this by myself, and I just can't wait until I deliver this baby and get rid of all of this and give it to somebody else. That is the looking out. She feels, to me, on the negative side, I'm trapped. I see trapped. That question.
And that's what those kiddos might think, yeah. and what they actually said. Are you ready for this? Little 6-year-old girls look at that picture and they immediately started talking about penises and vaginas and how many times has she been humped. Very inappropriate for a 6-year-old, but that's what came to their mind. So when I look at these photos and I think, I walk into places, I had a happy childhood. I walk in and I'm thinking, we're going for ice cream at McDonald's. I think of the happy ending. We have kids that walk into our classroom and they look at the exact same picture that we're looking at, and it might be a trauma trigger for them. It'll evoke a bad memory. And what he found from this study is that they were getting to the hyperarousal where heart rates were increased. And again, they had to take them out and help them self-regulate. So we throw up something in the classroom, a kid gets agitated, and our natural response is, quiet down, why are you doing that? When we need to step back, and that's what we've worked on with our teachers in the schools, is instead of reacting to the behavior, step back and respond to it, and realize there was an antecedent or something that may have triggered that or happened before. Sight, sounds, there was a little girl, he shares in his book, about a little girl that had, someone had come into the apartment and stabbed her mother. And he had also slit her throat. And so for about 17 hours, she was stuck in this apartment alone. Her mother was dead on the floor, and so she went in to the refrigerator and got some milk because she was thirsty. And she drank the milk, and of course it falls out of the slit, slides out of the slit in her throat. So you can imagine the smell of milk, the sight of milk. So what happens when this little girl goes to school and walks through the lunchroom? The cafeteria lady says, what? Like white or chocolate milk today? And she takes that tray and throws it and screams and kicks and goes and runs under a table. And our natural reaction, I mean, I know what I used to be like as a principal. You're not going to act that way in line, and you're going to miss recess. And we react to that. Now I'm taking a step back going, what in the world? Was it something that caused that? And let's get to the antecedent. What happened that got her so upset in that line? And we'll still deal with the emotions and the behaviors, but we need to step back and respond. What's going on with you at this moment? So that was a real eye-opener for me to realize that we all, everybody, teachers too, it's gained, I have so much more compassion for people that I work with and teachers that I work with because everybody has a story. And what's come from this, we've talked so much about kids, we're now finding that the teachers have their story too, and everybody has a background. So I'm going to pass this for now, but the amygdala hijack, of course, is important. It's that part of the brain where normally, and this slide isn't the easiest to see, but you know, our brain works that we have the visual signal that comes in, and a small portion of the message goes straight here to the amygdala, and we react. So that those times when we're stepping out in traffic and a car almost hits us and we just jump back, that's a good thing. That's when that visual makes us, it's life-saving, and we immediately react. But there are times when we get visual information where most of it goes back here, and we have time to analyze and assess it for an appropriate response. I mean, we've all had those moments when we're driving, and I'm driving along and someone's cut me off. Did he just honk at me, or I want to shoot out his tires? I mean, we have those moments where it's like, okay, but I really can't shoot out his tires because I don't own a gun, and that would get me in jail. And, you know, so you stop and you have time to process and think, that's not an appropriate response, Jill, so I need to calm down, and I can self-regulate and calm down. Some of our kids don't have that. They don't have this in green over here, this pause. Everything goes straight to the amygdala. It's like shark music is playing in the back of their head, and wherever they go, they constantly are looking, they're on high alert because they're waiting. They're working from the lower part of the brain. So we see kids all the time. I see kids going back to the lunch line. I had little kids, they would barely get bumped and have some crazy reaction. And I look back now going, okay, I needed to look back at what's going on with them because that's not a normal reaction. We get bumped, we usually can self-regulate and not immediately punch back or throw a tray. So kiddos often are working from the bottom up. They're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And I even call this in Chaddock School, when they were working with us, I love this one, I put fawn. Anybody know what fawn mode is? This was a new one for me, and I liked it, and I put it in there. You have those kids that their way of survival is they're super slick. You know what I mean? They're like, everything's fine. And they know exactly how to answer. That's a survival mechanism for them. They know exactly what to say to get what they want or to convince adults that they're okay. I'm perfectly fine. Everything's fine. When, in fact, they're not. And that's really, truly, a lot of traumatic kids know that is a survival mode. Or they're playing me. I mean, I've had many kids do that, but it's a survival mechanism. And when we look at these two photos, I often ask teachers, okay, you see this dog? What would you do if you had a dog on the left acting like that? What would you think? How would you respond? You're saying you wouldn't get back in his face and be like, what's wrong with you? You can't do that. But don't we do that with kids? We have kids in attack mode, right, that are just angry and they're yelling or they're swearing or doing whatever, and we get back at them. We wouldn't do that with a dog. What do you think caused this dog to do that? Fear? Somebody got in his space? Feels threatened? So it's interesting to me when I ask teachers about that, they have a really good response for that. He's probably someone got in his space. And when I ask them how to respond, they're usually take a step back, calm down. I need to be calm, so the dog calms down. So with animals, we tend to do the right thing. But when we have a kid in this kind of mode, I've seen it over and over. What do you see? The adult goes right back at him at that level. When in fact, as a child gets higher and louder, we should get softer and calmer. So I've had kids, I had to practice it the other day at the safe school, cussing me a new one. I mean, a skinny porta potty prostitute something, I don't know. I was just thrilled she called me skinny. I don't care, buddy. That's all I cared about. But porta potty prostitute, that's clever. But the thing is, she was yelling and screaming at me, and so as she got louder, I stepped back. I'm really upset too. Sorry you're upset. You're going to calm down. Calm down. And we're going to talk. So every time she got louder, I got quieter. And I think it's good for kids to see, for us to say in a quiet tone, I'm really angry right now. I'm upset. And I'm going to I'm going to model for them how I control that. Because anger at home for them is usually anger. High-pitched anger. They see, mom cussing out the cashier. That's how things are. So we model that for them. So look at the dog on the right. This is the little quiet one in kind of in freeze mode. He's hiding. So what would you do with that dog? I have kids. I see it in my truancy program all the time. It's like our safe school kids are hyper aroused because they are wound up and not self-regulated. The kids in my truancy program, they're hypo-aroused. They have their heads down. They are so avoidant of the world. They do everything possible to be quiet and non-existent and sleep. I see it over and over. And then I have teachers kicking them out because they're sleeping. Like, let's figure out what the problem is. They may not be getting enough sleep, or they could be depressed, or the work is too hard. They're just trying to avoid life in general. It's overwhelming. So it's just interesting how we have sometimes more empathy and compassion for animals, or have the right response. But if that were a child, would we do the same thing? So as I said before, our kids are often in shark mode. They often have that shark music behind them because the adults that have cared about them the most, that they should trust the most, are the ones that have bit them. And so they go around just waiting for someone else, constantly in shark mode. I'm going to skip this story, and I'm going to skip. I talked in the last group too, just briefly in our pilot schools. We talk a lot about just recognizing abuse without directly asking them. This is just a very quick one. A little girl in an Australian study, the teacher had her draw a picture of her family, and the teacher even said, tell me about your family. My family's good. And her teacher took her at face value and wrote, my family is good. But when you look closely at the picture, come to find out the girl was being physically abused by her mom. She drew her mom as this big, monstrous picture. Her brother is the phallic symbol. You can imagine what was going on at home. And look how she drew herself. Yeah. Completely void, detached, no identity. She's floating, no arms, no face. She's invisible. Now, I tell teachers that doesn't mean every picture you need to freak out, but just ask questions. Say your family's good. Tell me a little bit more about mom. Tell me about brother. So we can get a lot of signs. I'm running out of time. So our core of what we've been doing with our trauma-informed schools is this. Students who are loved at home come to school to learn. Students who aren't come to school to be loved. I have lots of teachers say, I'm not a social worker, but you're teaching the whole child. And the whole child means social, emotional, academic, health, everything. We need to look at the child as a whole. And a lot of our dysregulated students come here because they need love. They need calm voices, they need structure, they need appropriate touch because they're not getting that home. I used to have a kid in my principal's office all the time. I look back now, I'm like, oh, he would just come up to me. He would practically want to sit on my lap and do his homework. I'm like, you're in trouble, you gotta get, but I look back now, he was craving touch. Just anything, a pat on the shoulder, just to have that love. Every Opportunity is a great YouTube video. If you just want to Google Every Opportunity, you've probably seen it. It's a school district did this, and it shows the kid throughout the day. He gets on the bus, and if you've seen it, the first round, he's completely ignored by all of the adults, and then in the second round, the video, they show how everybody's very trauma-informed and sensitive, and relationships are first. That's a great video. So our pilot, I said I don't have a pretty fancy chart to tell you step by step what to do, and I don't because it's going to look different for your building's needs. But these are really the 7 components that we have, and who knows, we may add more or take away. But right now, our core concept of our 5 pilot schools is that we have a shared understanding of learning and behavior. Actually, I have a slide for each one of these. So we've gone through, we make sure that they all have the research. And I'm telling you, this one could take a whole year. I can't give you a timeline. I just know some of our schools, within a month or two, it's like they get it. The majority of them get it. They understand the science, the research, and they were ready to move on. My high school, they're in year 2 now. They're almost there. So every school is very, very different and on their own timeline. So you can't really put it in a neat little year 1, year 2 because it just doesn't work that way. This was really important for us to make sure. Second component out of the 7, it's all about self-regulation. Remember that, true or false? Most academically successful kids, and I'm watching my time because it is noon, teach regulation by modeling it, predictable routines, emphasis on recognizing unique needs and positive behaviors. We spend a lot of time talking about attachment. We talk about Glasser's book, Response to Inappropriate Behavior. Focus your energy on the behaviors you want. We talk about restorative practices, the truth about punishment. We know kids only behave when the punisher is present. I only go the speed limit when there are cops around. As soon as the cops are gone, whoosh. And then this is huge. Adult responses are calm, low volume, and consistent. One of our pilot schools, I was so proud. One of the teachers saw one of the cooks kind of speaking harshly with a kid. This is when you know you have a cultural shift in the school, because the cooks have gone through the training too. And he went up to this person and said, wait a minute, remember, we are a trauma-informed school, and that's not how we respond. I mean, he said it nicely, but the fact that the adults were holding each other accountable shows me a cultural shift is happening, and that social interactions are priorities. Student of concern meetings, circles, consistent routines, social skills training. So some of the things that we've done, I'm going to slide through year 1 and year 2, hopefully in like 3 minutes here. We've done a lot of book studies. You'll get copies of this so you can see. You don't have to write all of these down. Year 1 book studies that we've done. That everything we've done has really not cost a lot of money. Book studies are cheap. Brought in Kevin Jones to work on restorative practices with our pilot schools. Great activity. If you haven't heard of Know Me, Know My Name, our Jenna Oriana implemented this, and we're going to do this in our safe school where they put every single kid's picture up child's picture up in the teacher's lounge, or you put one of those giant interstate studio photos up if you have 500 kids, and they put initials by each kid that they had a connection with. And it was eye-opening for those kiddos that had blank cards. Their goal was to make sure, try doing that in high school, how many kids are invisible. So that way they made sure every child had a connection. They've been doing mood check-ins, visuals, calming strategies, breathing exercises, lots of breathing going on. Each one of the schools, I can't remember which one, but every single classroom has a safe place. I think it's Franklin. Instead of sending kids straight to the principal, they have tried to utilize the safe place, alternative seating. We brought in yoga instructors. And again, every school is at a different level on this. Some are still kind of, I don't know about this yoga thing, but I'll maybe do some breathing. And some, you can see here, the whole kindergarten classroom, they do it daily. Mindfulness training, we brought in a person for that to work with our pilot schools. So all of these resources have gone in our 5 pilot schools, so that, and it's in their building with the whole staff as much as possible. We went to visit Chaddock in Quincy to learn from them. They're almost like our 5th partner. This is not our calm room, but it's our goal of a calm room, that one of the schools has an open space that they're trying to get some funds and donations to design. They have a calm room started, but not as they want to use it, and staffing issues. We brought in Mary Tavagia to talk about social, emotional, and common core, how it all links together. We've spoken at conferences. This was a year ago, and I laugh because we have so much more to share now. That was just the very beginning of our journey. I'm flipping the wrong way. We've also brought Heather Forbes, author of Help for Billy, to Decatur. And again, it's just when you put your resources together, the 4 of us partnering together, we're able to do so much more. It keeps slipping because I'm hitting something. We brought Jim Sporliter in from Paper Tigers. We brought him in twice to work in the community and in the pilot schools. Year 2, these are some of our latest book studies we have going on now. Nadine Burke-Harris, if you've not seen her, just follow her on TED Talks. Her book just came out, powerful. An interesting book the high school wanted, and I'm letting them lead this. They're calling me saying, okay, the leadership or my teachers want to read this book. Great. So they wanted to read Attack of the Teenage Brain. And John Medina, if you read his Brain Rules, very, very interesting book. And that's written well for my high school, middle school teachers are loving that. I'm like, oh, this makes sense now. Documentaries. Room to Breathe, Resilience, we've been showing those. We had Chaddock come in. We've been doing restorative circles. This is what Muffley's doing. They love the movie Inside Out. And so, again, their teacher team came up with this. We're just seeing phenomenal things. Classroom mantras in every classroom. I saw a kindness board in one of the schools the other day where parents were allowed to write acts of kindness or thank yous on it. Just little things that you see coming up that show that connection between the social emotional. It's just part of the culture, that emotions are a priority. And that feeling of safety, that bottom brain, it's important to get so we can get to learning. We are just starting, if you've heard of the 360 spreadsheet, this is a sample of a teacher that tried to plug it in with kids that she had, and it covers everything of a child's life. So if you have a student of concern or all of your kiddos, I'm going to rush through. We're starting student of concern meetings at the Safe School now. We even had our teachers go out, and this was their idea. Argenta Oriana Elementary was near Healthy Stride Stable, so they went out and had the teachers do an obstacle course with the horses. Because again, horses, if you're nervous, they're nervous. And one of the teachers like, this horse won't follow me. That's because you're acting like that. And kids are the same way. And if you get in its face, the horse's face, it's not going to move. Same thing with kids. You have to build trust. So that was a great exercise for them to take back. It's going to start playing. So the data I wanted to show you real quick. Muffley Elementary this year, 85% of the kids have 0 referrals, and that's their SED program. And what the teachers have said, the kids haven't changed. Kids are kids. We've changed. We are doing something differently. We are responding to behavior instead of reacting, and we're teaching replacement behaviors. And by spending time on the social emotional, we're having more time to learn and fewer behavior problems. So, my favorite quote, if we want to see a change, we must be willing to do something we have not done before. Kids are kids, they're not going to change. How we respond is making a difference. So we have a case study going on with our SIU partners. This is very exciting. They did get a grant to conduct this case study, so I hope in a year I can come back and share some of the information. But we're looking for these particular issues because it's a cultural shift in a trauma-informed school. It's more of a narrative, so we're collecting a lot of stories as well as data to see what's working, what's not, what are the health issues, how can health, community, schools come together to help the child. And if you haven't seen Josh Shipp, Google Josh Shipp on YouTube. Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story.